Our kids are wrestling with some pretty big questions at this point in Western history as we continue to progress through our postmodern, post-Christian. Actually, we're post-postmodern.
Yeah.
To be honest.
What is this now?
Yeah. Day in which we live, where young people are connected to each other around the world. They're connected to messages that they like no other generation has been, and so they struggle with this. Josh, by the way, my name is Dan, and I'm with Josh. I am a teaching pastor at Life Fellowship Church, and Josh is our executive producer for Life Talks, and he is the president of the Equal Rights Institute. But we've been talking about just these questions that they're wrestling. So just happens to be that as we're recording this episode of our podcast on Sunday, I leave to go to Colorado, and I'll drive another 2 or 3 hours after that to go way up in the mountains. And I'm going to spend a week with a group of about 40 young people who are gap year students. Gap year is a thing that's kind of emerged more recently. It's been around for many, many years, but it's become more popular, where kids take a year out of high school and they go on to college, or before they go on to college, and they just learn, explore, have some fun, figure out what they want to do, what they want to major in. And so these are kids from around the world. Half of them are from Canada, some are from Central America, some are from Europe, and the rest are from the United States, from what I understand. And we're going to be talking about these topics. These kids need some direction, so that's what we've been doing. We've talked about everything from answering the big questions, the metaphysical questions, what's the role of suffering in the world, and questions that we enjoy in philosophy classes, but something more practical as well. Today, Josh, I think one of the things that is hard for kids as they get into a collegiate setting in particular is the clash that often occurs for the first time in their life when they're away from home between science and faith. And, naturalists and scientists and so forth often want to say that they're very, very objective thinkers. The scientific process, the rules of discovery and so forth are what guide them. But even science is not immune from biases. It's not immune from subjectivity and so forth.
Everyone has a metaphysical basement. If you ask enough why questions and go down, everyone at some point has some basic axiomatic beliefs, meaning just like these are like the things I just kind of know to be true, and I don't even feel like I need to argue for them.
Right.
And scientists have that too.
Yeah, and the problem with that is a refusal to explore that basement then can cause problems with the rest of the superstructure that you build above it.
Yes.
And so when people walk in, for instance, with an atheistic or at least an agnostic, but usually an atheistic worldview in that, then they don't see God in anything and refuse to see God in anything. They believe that there is a scientific explanation for everything. Whereas even a person who is a theist at some level, we have to understand where they're coming from as well, or we're never going to be able to engage them intelligently in a substantive conversation.
Yeah.
So there's and the way I grew up in a fundamentalist mindset, it was kind of like, doesn't matter. You don't need to be exposed to that.
Yeah,
Right.
I think we've all seen negative results of that attitude.
The fact is they're going to be exposed to it at some point.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not going to be under our ability to control it. And often then the dismantling can occur very, very rapidly. Yeah. I know you spend a lot of time on college campuses and engaging with those. And you also write curriculum as part of the Equal Rights Institute. So what do you see on college campuses? How ill-prepared, I'm not even going to go with how prepared. I'm going to say how ill-prepared is the typical young person who comes from a Christian background, an evangelical perspective, to be able to engage with science and faith?
That's a great question. How ill-prepared are they? I think probably on average, devastatingly ill-prepared.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times Christian parents, for a lot of understandable reasons, want to protect their kids from, like, let's say old earth ideas. Let's say there's a family and the parents are coming from like a young earth creationist kind of a standpoint, and they would reject kind of an old earth view of kind of the earth, even from Christians. Like, they are probably not exposing their even teenagers like, hey, let's think about the differences here between these different views. Let's watch a debate on this together. Or what have you been learning about this in school? Like having having those discussions, we sometimes it's kind of like we either don't want to take the time for it or whatever, we don't do it. And so then they just kind of have an assumption that they've been taught like all these things that are like clearly, obviously, scientifically true, and like everyone kind of knows it. And then they get to college, especially let's say if like they were homeschooled and like they really didn't have like maybe any access to outside information, then it's like, oh my goodness, they're seeing things for the first time and they're hearing them from experts, thoughtful people
who are in positions of power,
and authority, and are going to have a lot of good answers to a lot of the basic kind of things that Christians often say in response to them. It's like they've never heard Christian apologists before either. And so if we are not preparing our students to kind of think about, there are different views on this, and there are thoughtful people on multiple sides of this, by the way. And so let's like, I'm wanting to, like, when I'm doing this with my teens, like kind of the more and more the principle that I am noticing in me is it is less about me trying to teach them to believe exactly what I currently believe. And it's more me trying to show them that it is okay for Christians to be open-minded. It is okay for us to try to think through difficult topics and listen to experts and try to figure out what's best. And we can do that together. And you don't have to be like, oh, I'm embarrassed to tell Dad I heard this like pro-choice thing or this evolution thing or whatever. Like, no, because we have those conversations.
Yeah, and that's really, really essential because the conversation is going to occur if nowhere else between their ears. But when they do get into college, they have basically apologists for a different worldview that are in place, and they're very good at what they do.
Yes,
but I like to think we're pretty good at what we do if we prepare our kids, but it takes a proactive stance on the part of the parents to get that, and we have to be careful because there's a intellectual reductionism, I think, that often occurs in evangelicalism.
Yes,
God said it, that I believe that settles it type thinking. Fundamentals took it one step further. God said it, that settles it.
Right,
Whether or not you believe it. I mean, I literally heard somebody go on a tirade about that. And that's all fine and good. It makes for great rhetoric and super preaching, and people can amen and wave their hankies. Yeah. But when a kid's in a college course with 1,000 other students, and they're one of only 3 people, and the other 2 don't want to raise their hand because they don't want to be made fools of.
Yeah.
Or they were taught in this super narrow perspective of like, well, scientists made up dinosaurs. Literally, I've heard that one.
Oh no!
Yeah, that they're not really real, or they can't prove the dinosaurs really, or the extent of their apologetic on origins and things like that is they went to the Creation Museum and the Ark one year on vacation.
It's all going to be a Ken Ham based apologetic for them.
Yeah. At the same time, I think we also have to recognize the average parent is not prepared to do battle with a guy with a PhD and
that's a great point. So it's like so what should we do with that given that? And I think maybe part of it is and this is difficult for a lot of parents, but I strongly think it's okay for us. Okay, so then if you're into if we're going to stick with this analogy, if you're really into Ken Ham, who represents kind of a certain end of the spectrum on that debate, isn't the most respected intellect like on that side of the debate among people like kind of like the general like the experts in it, then let's at least be considering other thoughtful Christian voices that have other views on that, so we can at least consider. Maybe in the end we still think that Ken Ham is the most correct or the closest to it. Fine, but at least get there by comparing the view to the other ideas and seeing like does one make more sense of the other. Like, don't just assume that whatever your view has been is necessarily the most accurate one, because science evolves. Scientists are learning new things, and it's relevant.
Yeah, and their arguments are getting better.
Yes.
And I think that's important to note as well.
Yeah.
So let's take just a fun little sidetrack. Okay. Have you been to the Creation Museum, or have you been to the Ark?
I haven't. I want to at some point. I need to do this. Yeah. There's a really hilarious video of a Christian comedian that you would love that I'm going to have to show you after this, of him touring the Creationist Museum, but I have not personally been.
Well, I've been to both. I'm glad I went.
Okay.
I enjoyed the Creation Museum immensely. I felt like it was well done. It was scholarly.
Wait, are we talking about both
We're
things,
talking
the
about
Ark
both.
and the Christian Museum in D.C.? Or are you talking about
the one in the museum in D.C. is the Bible Museum. That needs to be a mandatory stop for anybody to go to.
Okay. I've been to that. That is amazing.
So there is a creation museum that's about 30, 45 minutes away from the Ark. But they're both Ken Ham.
Got it. Okay.
Answers in Genesis. So I enjoyed the museum. I felt like it made its case far better than the Ark did. I felt like the Ark, when I went to the Ark, I kind of felt like the opening scene of the first Jurassic Park movie, where the grandfatherly dude keeps saying we've spared no expense, and we've got all of these. It's schlocky. I'm sorry, and people will write me letters, and please go ahead, feel free. I've seen them all. I've been controversial over this as well. I'm not sad I went. I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
Would I take my kids there? I probably would, but I would also challenge some of it, because a lot of it is built on theories and whatevers, and I think he makes a plausible case for it. But Ken comes, well, first of all, it is the Ken Ham show when you go there.
Yes.
You have to literally walk through a bookstore at the end of it that is honestly just all Ken Ham 24. I mean, he's even got a hologram of himself, for Pete's sake.
Oh, wow.
And I get it. He needs to make a profit, needs to earn a living and all of that. But Ken comes across so dogmatically harsh and narrow that, and this goes back to what you were saying, why I thought of it. He is so young earth that he will question your theological construct on every doctrine you hold if you even open your mind to the possibility that between Genesis 1 and 2 there was a gap, or that there possibly was a creation before creation, or some of the other theories that are out there.
Maybe day might mean something else.
That day like does not mean 24 hours, particularly when it was defined prior to the creation of, So when we look at all of these things, then what that does is the thing that frustrates me about agnostics and fundamentalists and everybody in between, not agnostics, atheists, and that is you shut down the conversation before you even get to have it.
Yeah, there can often be a closed-mindedness there, and then it's like, why are we having the dialogue? I've said that having a debate or a dialogue with a closed-minded person is sort of like playing tennis or practicing tennis against a brick wall.
Right.
You might get better, but that wall ain't changing. You know what I mean? Like, so there comes a time where I'd rather hang out with equally open-minded, kind of reasonable, thoughtful people, because the real magic happens there.
Yeah, and I've never moved 1 inch from my notion, my belief that there is a God, that he matters, and that he created everything that exists.
Yes.
So I've never moved away from that.
Yes.
So you can't call me heretic.
Yeah, there are a lot of
you can call me
Christians,
that, but it doesn't make it true.
Yeah, there are a lot of Christians like both of us that can say we absolutely believe in God and we believe in a creator, and we don't necessarily have to agree with everything that Ken Ham thinks.
And I believe that much of what he says is a plausible explanation. Could God have created things with apparent age? Yes, he could have.
Absolutely.
All of those things. So I'm not dismissing what he says, but what I'm saying is I need to know what other people are saying and thinking, so I know how to respond to it. And that's what I would say to the parents listening to this, as you're navigating the process of discipling your children to be able to survive a year at UNCC Charlotte or UNCC Chapel Hill or whatever, and they're getting a degree in molecular biology, and they're going to be hearing this worldview that is probably foreign to the typical homeschool or Christian school kid, educated graduate, that you have prepared them for this moment, because faith and science must intersect, will intersect, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, if all truth is God's truth, then we don't
Gabeline.
need to be afraid of conversations where we're trying to find truth together.
Yeah. So my approach to this, Josh, and I'd be interested to hear how you respond to it, is that no parent, no homeschool parent, no Christian school teacher can be an expert on everything science is a very massive broad.
Absolutely.
But what we can do is teach the correct biblical worldview as we would believe it, that there is a God, he matters, and give them a good Christian apologetic by which they can measure. See, I believe this: when you know the truth, and the truth is apparent and obvious, and we accept it as objective, then that positions us to be able to handle error. We may not always be able to give an answer that's adequate, but it's going to hit our filter.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we won't have an answer in the moment, and that's totally okay. I actually think I've been encouraging people when in my speaking that it's like, if you are talking to, like, let's say a pro-choice person, and in this dialogue at the end of it, they asked you a really great question that you haven't thought of before. You just don't have the answer. It's like, that's okay, because you saying that's a great question. I haven't thought of. Let me get back to you. Let's get Starbucks again in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And I'm gonna and there's a safety net anyway. Like, come ask us. We've got an answer. That is going to be what they remember more than any interesting facts or statistics or philosophical arguments you made earlier. Anyway, like, people are not used to having someone to say, "That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I will get back to you because you deserve an answer to that." Like, that's totally fine.
We seem to miss. We seem to miss that. We seem to think that if we don't have an answer immediately, that the other person has won, and we're looking at this incorrectly. If you think it's a one conversation battle,
Yes, yeah,
and there's going to be this isn't a debate on PBS. All right.
Yes.
If it was, by the way, there is a debate between Bill Nye the Science Guy and Ken Ham, which is one of the most atrocious things.
It is one of the most atrocious, and it is also one of the best, like, clear examples of what it looks like to see an open-minded versus closed-minded person talk. Like, in the Q&A, it literally comes up, and one of them says, "I'm open-minded," and one of them says, "Very much, I'm not." And I feel like that's the end of the debate right there.
Yeah,
like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's kind of like I wouldn't change anything, you know?
Right. It's like as long I know that I could not change my mind about this, because it's like, dude, why would anyone talk to you?
Yeah, and ironically, they sell that copies of that videotape.
Really?
Oh, yes, they do. And
that actually shocks me.
They 5 years ago when I went there, it was for sale.
Oh, that wasn't a good look for him.
No, it wasn't. And so reasonable people understand that the human mind has limitations to it, and the amount of knowledge that any one person can possess. I have to say, no person has a corner on the truth except the creator of truth. Right. So, and one of the points I'm making in one of my lectures next week is part of being a critical thinker is to understand it's okay to use the word yet.
Yes.
So I don't know this answer yet.
Yes.
Now, the answer may not have even been revealed to us yet. God may not have allowed us to advance to the point. But that doesn't mean there isn't an answer. It just means we haven't reached it yet. So that gives me a reason to pursue God. It gives me a reason to learn from him, to study, to analyze his word better, and to look at his creation. And that's why science is not anti-Christian.
Yeah.
Science is the most Christian thing you can do because it leads you to God.
Yeah.
And so I think there's also a danger where we dismiss the whole of the scientific exploration and say faith is enough.
Yes.
Faith is always enough if it's founded to the right thing. But it's enough to a degree, but it's God didn't give us a finite level of curiosity. He gave us this curiosity that we continue to feed, and it opens up like a road before us.
I love that.
And so you don't get into, oh, I don't have any more questions. I'm done, God. You don't do that. And so, but the cool thing is, every time you see, a quark, you got to wonder, well, what's underneath the quark? And who put that there? Yeah. And it opens up your mind philosophically, scientifically, theologically.
Yeah.
You have to me, it makes me want to worship.
I've had that same experience. Like, I've had like learning certain scientific things can make me want, like, I'll give a fun example I love telling audiences about how in the early week of life, your first, water slide ride basically to the womb, there are inside fallopian tubes are thousands of tiny little hairs called cilia. And everyone always gives me a blank look like, who cares about hairy fallopian tubes? But I'm like, I'll tell you why you should care. This is amazing because they all work together. The coordinator, they do the wave. Their job is to gently roll the blastocyst, just like 12, 48, cells, eventually hundreds to the safe spot at the end, and they're all doing this together. And then when it gets to the womb, there is an actual like biochemical dance that between the mom's body and the baby, because it's trying to find the best, most optimal spot in the uterus to implant. And if there's enough time, the mom's body will actually give a biochemical signal. This is oversimplified, but sort of like a little lower and to the left, like that's the first dance between mother and like, if that doesn't make you excited about God and what he did, then there should be questions.
You're not thinking deeply enough.
Right.
And that's it. And we ought to be encouraging our kids to think deeply.
Yeah.
Because if we really believe this stuff, we believe it's true, then we believe there are answers that point us to God at every step of the journey. Yeah. And if we can leave our listeners to this particular episode to any conclusion, when you are parenting your kids, and young people, if you're listening to this, when you get to that point, you understand. Begin with your feet in the right place, and that is there is a God and he matters, and that there is such a thing as objective truth. And if you identify an objective truth, then you can build on that. And so teach your kids objective truth. Teach your kids what the Bible says. Teach your kids there is a God and he matters. And don't leave that job to somebody else. It's not somebody else's job, because nobody will do it better than you. But if you're going to do that, you've got to be proactive. You've got to be involved in your kid's life. Yep. You can't pop a video or a homeschool lesson or enroll them in a Christian school and say, okay, my job is done here. Yep. And you ought to be lifelong learners as well as parents, if you want your kids to be involved in this. So reconciling faith in God with the scientific process, scientific understanding, scientific conclusions, I contend it is an important part of a well-developed critical thinker in your home.
Absolutely. Can't agree more.
All right. Well, that's about it for this one. We're going to do one more episode where we're going to talk about the mission of the church and our role in it as it relates to our worldview and what our young people are wrestling with. As always, we appreciate the fact you listen to us on a regular basis here at Life Talks. We hope that you'll drop us a line. I got another note this week from somebody that wanted us to do another episode on something else. I always enjoy those. You can contact us if you would like at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Share us on social media. Leave us a review if you would. But until next time, thanks as always for listening to us here at Life Talks.